phrase knowing we are the self does not always translate into living as the self. That's indirect knowledge, correct?
Knowing
we are the self, knowing I am the self, does not always translate into living as the self.
No, the moment that you know I am the self, this is what we call direct knowledge. Indirect knowledge is the dualistic knowledge, as if I know the self exists and I'm trying to become it, to contact it, etc., etc.
Through sadhana and practice.
Yeah, by doing something to become or to connect with the self or to reach the self. But when you come to Vedanta, we immediately get the direct knowledge. The question is not whether the direct knowledge necessarily translates as moksha or not. That's the fundamental question. It is going to translate to moksha to the degree that this knowledge is hard and fast, always present and good. At the beginning, this knowledge is on and off, on and off. And then sometimes you feel that your life is a translation of the knowledge, and sometimes you feel that your life is contradicting the knowledge. You understand? And then one may even get confused when you say, well, you know. You understand? And it's all a function of how much pressure the vasana is, those vasanas are putting on one's conscious mind.
So it's the vasanas that create that instability of establishment as the self?
Totally, yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
Ramji even used to say, which I found a bit exaggerated, you remain the same jerk as before. I was really shocked when he said that. But I understand now, you know, basically you're not perfect then all of a sudden. So that is what he said really.
Yeah. You can know you are the self, and to use this example, you can be a jerk as you were before, and then your life is not going to translate the knowledge. Okay? And if that is the case, and then we can pose the question, what is the good of this knowledge if it does not translate into beautiful, elegant, and life free from being pushed around by those vasanas. Ramji, when he says that you can be the joke, he's dramatizing the fact that don't expect that you're going to become a saint or you're going to purify all your vasanas and so on. The jiva remains. It's a wiser jiva, it's more pure in terms that its thoughts and emotions are more positive because they are conformed to Ishvara knowledge and self-knowledge. So it's a beautiful individual with more wisdom. But it's not that you have to finish with all those vasanas. It means to say that sometimes you can feel a little irritation, you can feel a little grumpy sometimes, but you don't identify with the jiva. You see those things may surface and immediately you just let it slide because there is nobody to own that. I have a few times I have given the example of when I was running my restaurant. I had a fight with my son, and it was after self-realization took place. And then my son was angry, yelling at me. We had an argument, and then he said, "And by the way, you are not enlightened." And then later on, he came to me and said, "And are you not ashamed?" And the most funny thing for me, it was just a few weeks after the event. And by the way, self-realization is not an event, but there is a moment that the click happens, and then you just say, "Oh, there is a moment that I understood that the search was over because I have realized that I am what I was looking for." But the most intriguing thing is that I was not ashamed of having had this argument in the kitchen with all my stuff in the kitchen, in the middle of the house. Some guests heard the argument, fight, the yelling, in the discussion, and there was a total sense of detachment. So you don't get identified either with anything that you could be proud or ashamed about, you know. That's the only difference. But generally speaking, those vasanas, they get purified or neutralized by self-knowledge. Many of them. Okay? Is everybody in here? Okay. Sadashiva Samrambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Gurate Miti Muchibeda Vigagine Vyoma Vada Vyapata Dehaya Dakshinamurtiya Namaha Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharantam Agocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatosh Maham Om Shanti Ramji Shamkara. Can anyone confirm verse 77? Is that so? When the upadis are negated, no difference remains between the individual and the total. Right? Very simple. There is one eye, the eye somehow gets confused with the piece of equipment here, another equipment there, the fan, the blender, and so on. Electrical power gets a little bit confused, and then when all those equipments are negated, and then we have isolate the power, the self, and we know who we are. When the upadis are negated, no difference remains between the fundamental nature of the individual and the total, and the nature of the total, right? That's what it means, remains between the individual and the total. It's always referred to the fundamental nature. The difference between the king and the subject is only due to a difference in the status. Both are just human beings. No? It's all a jiva, and in fact it's not really a jiva, because as we have established, a jiva is not really a jiva. You remember, it reminds me of the beggar sleeping on the main road in Tiru, the trucks and the bus and the pollution, and he was not feeling well. He vomited a little bit, and he's sleeping on his vomit, and so it's really ugly picture. And he's there, and then he enters into Anandamaya Kosha, and he goes in deep sleep. He's in the bliss. And then at the same time we look at the situation of a king in his palace, in his beautiful bed, covered with silk and silk pillow covers and so on. And he's there, and then he also enters in deep sleep, and he enters Anandamaya Kosha. So what is the difference in terms of state of experience, state of consciousness? They are both enjoying the fullness of Anandamaya Kosha. See how the upadis are misleading, you know? The king and the subject is just a difference of the status. The deep sleep state of both is just the same status, the same experience, but being experienced from two different meat tube, like Ramji would put, right? So, both are just human beings. We are offered another analogy to help us to understand how the upadis operate. Social status is signified by dress and the relative importance of respective functions. A king wears a crown and issues commands. His subjects are attired more humbly and obey those commands. But both king and subject are human beings, and as such, they are the same. Ishvara, the totality, signified by that, may be likened to the king. The individual signified by you may be likened to the subject. Stripped of their apparent difference, both are awareness. The same way, the subject and the king, both stripped of their status, they are both just human beings. Stripped of their apparent difference, both are awareness. But whereas the king and the subject, stripped of their difference, remain separate beings of the same species, such is not the case with the totality and the individual. When the upadhis are negated, neither Maya nor Jiva persist. You see the difference? So when we negate the status of the king and the subject, we still have two factors in play, two different jivas, two human beings with different construct but different status. But when we strip away we negate the difference between the upadhi and the jiva, or Maya and the jiva, and then we have only awareness left. There are not two different things. That's what it means. The totality and the individual were superimpositions on the self. Once they are removed, they vanish like a snake once perceived in the rope. This is not to say that once we negate the upadhis, the sense will cease to function and the world will disappear. But that what we formerly perceived as separate objects will be realized as awareness. I think we are very clear about that. The world is not going to disappear when we negate its reality. The jiva is not going to disappear, the ego is not going to disappear. Everything remains, but seen for what they are, just names and forms, appearance in consciousness. Not anything separate from awareness. Verse 78. The oneness of the individual and the total is established by implication. It is not enough to totally reject or not reject the meaning of you and that. It must be through a rejection of the non-essential attributes of the two. So to establish the common denominator factor between the two, it's not enough that we just negate both. We need to establish the fact that whatsoever common denominator is the same in both. We need to remove all the non-essential attributes so that we are left with the fundamental nature of one and the other. That's what it's saying. It must be through the rejection of the non-essential attributes of the two. In the statement, you are that, with you standing for individual and that for the totality, we immediately recognize difference between the two terms that would seem to make it impossible to equate them. We must then either reject the statement as contradictory or see if there is an implied meaning to the words that can reconcile the contradiction. So we have to dig into the implied meanings, because as we say, you and that is the most contradictory thing, because how can one thing be another? Evidently, that is there not as something other than myself. I was having a conversation with someone today, and Someone will say, it would be better to say you are this, not you are that. But the very purpose of the word that is to establish duality, you and that, so that you can resolve the duality by understanding the essential fundamental nature of both, you and that. If we would say you are this, you would not be establishing duality and therefore resolving duality by asserting the fundamental nature of you and that. We immediately recognize the difference between the... Yes?
I think that I had a question about Nisargadatta's use of that formula. He used that formula or something like it, but he didn't really mean the same thing, did he?
Well, no. He did not teach the scriptures, but he used to talk about, to begin with, his statement is not what the Upanishad says as a mean to address the student and to say, you are consciousness. He was saying, I am consciousness. Because all his talks was a description of his experience or his state. You understand? Therefore he comes and says, I am that. And then he tries his best to explain what's that, but he fell short on that because he established that is a state of the absolute. And everybody remained there. I was imagining the state of the absolute was a state where there is nothing, emptiness, because a few times he was giving some hints of that. Basically he was saying that Nirvikalpa Samadhi is that, the absolute, you know. And he was calling pure consciousness, he was calling the reflect consciousness.
So that's the use of the word that the scriptures explicitly avoided. He used the word that to refer to limitless awareness. But the scripture uses the word that to refer to the totality.
No, the scripture, they use the word that to refer to the fundamental common principle between the individual, Ishvara, and awareness, which is pure awareness.
But the first understanding that's uncovered is you are that is the...
You and Ishvara, you are made of the same fundamental essential.
That's the individual and the totality.
Yeah.
It's the implied understanding. The common substrate is limitless awareness.
Yes.
Which isn't referred to as that.
It is referred...
It's the implied meaning, but it's not the explicit meaning.
Yeah.
Because that implies an object. When you say that,
Yeah.
it invites the mind to conceive an object.
Yeah.
And that's why you are, that doesn't mean you are this consciousness.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the implied meaning.
And I am that is to say,
Yeah.
also doesn't refer to consciousness.
Yeah. When we say that, it's not why we don't say Jesus. I was trying to say what's my understanding why it's not really. It does not help to say. Here we have the three verses trying to explain how to resolve this apparent contradiction. Okay, we're gonna go through them. One is by negating the implied meanings of both, and then there are very nice. It seems to come from Dayananda, just scrutinizing that. But
say, for example, if you are there, you are awareness, you take away the subject-object like that, something other than you yourself. If you say you are awareness, they say you are that.
But it means that refers to that. The that refers to awareness. It is that. That self is you. The small self is the big self. You understand? You are that. It's because here and there they link, they refer that to the totality. Here and there. But even in between those lines, they refer to the fundamental nature of Ishvara and the Jiva. Okay? That is the substratum. They also mention again and again, it's the substratum. Okay? So sometimes it refers as the totality, and my understanding by reading this a couple of times is that sometimes they say that the fundamental nature of Ishvara and the Jiva is one and the same. When we say that we are all one in terms of creation, we are not saying that we are God, like I was trying to illustrate today. It's saying that we are made of the same nature of Ishvara, which is consciousness. We are a thought, Ishvara is another thought, and the thought is made out of consciousness. So we are one in our fundamental nature with Ishvara. And when we say you are that, sometimes it is referring to awareness as well, the fundamental nature of everything. Okay, so it's both. The question is why to use the word that, and maybe Vinay can say something.
I think maybe Tattvamasi is saying Jivatman is Paramatma.
Yeah, it is the absolute.
Much better.
I think
This is much better.
because Jiva refers to Jivatman.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
Paramatma.
Yeah.
But you cannot call Paramatma that. You cannot do that.
Well, it's you call that, as I mean, to first establish duality and contradiction, how one thing can be another, and that's the difficult, because we are referring to two orders of reality. You are that, and then you have to resolve, which is a period contradiction, and the three verses go about resolving that to establish the non-essential attributes of you and that, so that you come out with the fundamental nature of you and that is one and the same, consciousness.
Right, so the implied meaning of the substratum, the Brahman, is in the Asi, not in the you and or the that, in the Asi in the equation. That's how it is built up.
Yeah.
So you, that is me, and that is the totality, and we are equated. And what means the equation? The taking away all the non-essential.
Yeah, I don't know Sanskrit, but I mean, I guess that to translate Tattvamasi in English language, it should be quite challenging, because the English language is a very short and business-oriented language, very practical, and so they came up with you are that,
The Asi is you are.
Yeah.
It is, there are different words for to be in Sanskrit. You know that too. Asi means actually it's kind of an equation.
Yeah.
But you are happy, then you don't use Asi,
Right.
because it is a momentum. But Asi is really like
Right.
it is that. So that's what is Asi.
Right.
Aham, Asti is the same.
Yeah. Yeah. The important thing is what Vinay was saying is that Tattvamasi refers to you, the Jiva, is in truth Paramatma. If you are the.
Yeah, I think that's the understanding in general is divine circles, but the neo-divine world doesn't go through the detailed steps that we're going through.
That for sure, yeah.
That's the
And that's the difficult, and that's why I was trying to explain, Sylvia, why that is a good word. Because how can something be something else? How the Jiva can be something other than himself, that? So we establish this contradiction, and then we have to resolve. So what is the link there? What is the common factor? And then we have to come with a solution. It's not the I, the Jiva, I am God, or the self. This is a superimposition of Mithya and Satya. The Jiva superimposes itself. That is a very important thing for us to understand. Every time we say, and Ramji is very keen in saying that I am awareness, this is the true knowledge, I am awareness. It does not mean I, the Jiva, am awareness. You understand? So I, the fundamental nature of this reflect awareness, the Jiva, I, fundamental in my nature, am the self. I, the self, am the self. When we say I, the Jiva, am the self, we are superimposed and we are setting the ground for enlightenment sickness, superimposition of Mithya and Satya. So it's all about what we are in our fundamental, essential, independent nature as pure consciousness. You understand?
So our fundamental I is what's called Atma in Sanskrit.
Yeah, self.
And the fundamental big I is Brahman.
Yeah,
So what you say, Atma is Brahman.
yeah,
So you can compare it to pot space, that is Atma, and old space,
yeah,
that is
Yeah.
Brahman. But basically it is the same.
yeah, yeah. You get the space that we find in a small cup and the space we find in the universe. Fundamentally, they're both the same. You find a ray of light from original from the sun, and the one reflected originally, fundamentally, they are the same light rays. You know, that's what it means. That's the common denominator, and that's what it means when we say I am awareness. Otherwise, we just say, hey, I am a jiva, and on top of everything, I am awareness. You know? Yeah. That's the trick. Okay, let's see where I was. Oh, did we enter the 78, James? Yeah. Okay. In the statement "you are that," with you standing for the individual and that for the totality, we immediately recognize the difference between the two terms. I knew I could trust Ishwara, he was going to come back. We immediately recognize the difference between the two terms that would seem to make it impossible to equate them. How can something like the jiva be equated to the totality? So that makes us think, so what is wrong about this statement? We need to recognize difference between the two terms that would seem to be impossible to equate them. We must then either reject the statement as contradictory or see if there is an implied meaning to the words that can reconcile the contradiction. Logic offers us three ways to examine implied meanings. Now it's the beauty of this analysis. I think it was done fully by Dayananda. The first is substitute one term for another. So if you say, I am that, then that must be I. In the statement, the room is noisy, we did that today. Am I repeating myself, James?
No, it's just using the same example.
Yeah? No.
They are repeating.
In the statement, the room is noisy. If we substitute people for room, the statement makes sense and the substitution is justified. So you need to replace, to see what's the implied meaning and find a word that would make sense. We would replace the word noise with people. People are noise. The room is not noise. People are room. People for room. We know that the room is a composition of an inanimate object with no power to generate noise. So the statement implies the presence of people in the room. In the statement, you are that, the substitution of terms will not eliminate the apparent contradiction. You stands for the individual, meaning those characteristics that are specific to a particular body-mind. We know that such characteristics, whatever they may be, are defined by their limitations. A limited entity cannot be the totality, so it's already a total impossibility. A limited entity cannot be the totality of the environment in which it subsists. So how is the totality is really referring to Ishvara. So there is no term we can substitute for the individual that will eliminate his incommensurability with the total. Likewise, totality cannot be equated with anything that is so small, constituted by a small part, defined by its limit characteristic. And there is no term available for substitution that can make this possible. What could we say to equate the totality with something? There is no word we can replace that to make sense of this statement. So we must eliminate the first method of reconciling contradictions through implied meaning. The second method adds words to the statement to effect a clarity that eliminates the seeming confusion. If the croper in a casino announces red wins, we can arrive at his implied meaning by adding the words, the roulette ball landed on red. So we need to replace those red wins words with a better description of what's going on. So those who wagered on this color wins. The literal meaning that the color red wins makes no sense without the implied meaning. What words might be added to the statements "you are that" that would make it intelligible? So he's asked, what words might be added to the statement "you are that" we could somehow clarify this absurdity of this statement? So there is nothing that we can add, keeping the status of you and that as distinct objects in time. Any words that might be added to the definition of the individual could only further describe those limitations, right? If we try to enhance the description of a jiva, we would be just further enhance the limitations rather than explain how they might be equated with the totality, which admits no limitations. That which stands for the totality is not susceptible of further definition. What stands outside of the totality? What stands outside of the totality that can in any way add or change its meaning? So there is nothing we can add to the totality to make a better description, to see if we make sense of this statement. There is nothing. So the second method also leaves us with two terms that cannot be equated. The third method of searching for implied meanings involves distinguishing those aspects of the two terms that are contradictory from those that can be reconciled. So we're going to look for the fundamental. How is that? That we were saying in the beginning here. Non-essential, we have to remove the non-essential attributes and to be left with the essential attributes of each, okay, which is limitlessness. The third method of searching for implied meanings involves distinguishing those aspects of the two terms that are contradictory from those that can be reconciled. The contradictory aspects are then rejected, and what is left is accepted as the implied meaning. So now, Ishvara is awareness manifesting Maya, the totality. Jiva is awareness on which individuality is superimposed. The individual cannot be the totality, nor can the totality be the individual. So in the statement, you are that, both Jiva and Maya are contradictory and must be rejected. So both have to be rejected. What then remains of the two terms? Awareness. That's what Jayanifa was saying. Awareness is awareness. I am awareness. No. Awareness is awareness, the best statement. I awareness, am awareness. I'm aware of the world as well, aware of the individual. And in that awareness there are no difference. You are that means by implication. There is only awareness. Or awareness is awareness. All objects from a speck of dust to the cosmos itself are merely upadhis of awareness and therefore subject to negation. Is everyone clear about the logic presented here and how he came about playing with all of this analysis to equate? It's exactly what we knew from the beginning, but it's nice to follow the logic of Dayananda. Verse 79. For example, in the sentence, this person that you see here is that Devadatta, the discriminating person established the oneness by giving up the contradictory elements, meaning to say time, place, and circumstance. In the sentence, this person that you see here is Devadatta, the discriminating person established their oneness by giving up the contradictory elements, meaning to say time, place, and circumstance. The text provides us with an example often cited in Vedanta of how an upadhi is negated using the method of implied meaning. Let us suppose we have not seen our old acquaintance Devadatta for a long time. We meet a mutual friend at a social gathering and ask him, whatever happened to Devadatta? He points to a third man standing next to us and says, this is that Devadatta. We then recognize Devadatta despite the gray hair, the beard, and the extra pounds. After 30, 40 years, sometimes we have a hard time to recognize our old friends. We see our old friend as essentially the same. The effects produced by time are negated as upadhis. The adjuncts that had concealed him, so those extra pounds, those extra wrinkles, those gray hairs, and so on. The adjuncts that had concealed him until they were recognized as such. So we remove those adjuncts and then we see Devadatta in his original shape as we knew him. We were seeing Devadatta even before we realized him. Devadatta does not gain or lose anything in the process of our recognition. He's there, unchanged, the same, both before we realize his presence and afterward. The illustration also emphasizes that the self is not affected by the upadhis. It is the same before, during, and after the process of negation. Is that clear? No need for... Okay. All of that to convince us, that we are the most essential attribute that cannot be negated. We are the attributeless essence of everything that cannot be negated. Anything made of clay is clay through and through. Anything made of awareness is awareness through and through. There is nothing but awareness, so the individual and the total are one. In this way, the identity of the individual and the total is revealed in hundreds of Vedantic statements. So it seems that it's all clay. We assign names and forms. We designate pots and pitchers and plates by their shape and function, but they are all made of clay. The pot does not exist independently of the clay, nor is it essentially different from other objects made by clay. Again, it's not sameness, it's just its fundamental nature is the same. Non-duality is not sameness. Often Ranjit says that, Oneness is not sameness. The essential nature, fundamental nature is the same. In fact, there is no pot in any absolute sense, but merely clay available for a certain use. We have established that all objects appear in awareness. Further, we have seen that all objects are nothing other than awareness. Objects do not come into being and then somehow get notes by awareness, any more than pots come into being without a clay. Okay, so nothing can come into existence without existence itself, because there is no such a thing as non-existence, so that something can come and become existent. So a pot is but a clay. Where is that? Objects cannot come into existence and then somehow get notes by awareness, any more than a pots come into being without a clay. So pot needs to come into being from the clay, because clay is its fundamental nature. So we always come into existence the names and forms as we identify with upadhis come from the existence from our fundamental, essential nature, awareness. This means, of course, that there are no objects as they are conventionally understood. The knower and the individual subject and the known, the objective world, are mithya. This is a nice thing. The individual subject, he makes a nice distinction, because every individual thinks to be the subject. And that is the knower and the experiencer is an individual subject. The individual subject and all that is known by this individual subject are mithya, an apparent reality. Both resolve themselves into awareness, which is satya, the sole reality. The distinctions we make between the individual and the totality may be useful on the phenomenal level, but they are not real, for awareness cannot be divided. We may designate clay as a pot or a pitcher, but it is and always will be clay, despite the name and form assigned by us for our temporary convenience. The same may be said of our individuality and the totality. Both are nothing other than awareness, as Vedanta proclaims in countless writings and commentaries from time immemorial. Shall we play some Q&A, or shall we keep hammering on this, because this is going to keep, Therefore you are limitless, non-dual awareness, free of change and free of impurities, otherness. There is no other factor or other element rather than you. It's one without the other or any other thing. Therefore, you are limitless, non-dual awareness, free of change and impurities. Do we need to be convinced still? Huh? We still need, huh?
I would say our impurities are non-essential attributes.
Absolutely, well said. Yeah, we can just keep stripe all non-essential attributes until we are naked as consciousness. Yeah, we let go of the body, of all the upadhis, and then the mind. Yes. I was trying to invite you to ask a question.
I'm not sure whether I should or not, but I was confused by the statement, the knower is also mithya. I mean, we have to let the knower go as well.
Yeah, the knower.
The concept of the knower is also the concept, and as such an object, and as such mithya.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
The knower.
Because I was convinced the observer, this entity was the same as awareness.
Right. I understand.
You know, because I was doing this process of, separating this knower entity from all objects, but I thought,
Yeah. So that is a sattvic mind. A sattvic intellect is the fine observer of subtle phenomena in meditation, So this is still a reflect I. It's a reflection of awareness.
As good as.
almost. Okay.
That therefore the subtlety of this discrimination, because the knower and the experience is the subtle body, is the jiva. This phenomena called jiva is the knower and the experiencing entity. But yet, nobody knows or experiences anything without awareness, right? So the only question is, we know we experience, and when we know we experience from whatsoever we have here. All our notions, ideas, we are interpreting phenomena, very subtle, very beautiful, very dense and gross and ugly, or whatever. We are observing and simultaneously interpreting from whatsoever notions, ideas we have in our mind. So this is the individual subject or the individual knower. The key here, and when we meditate and this intellect becomes very subtle, that's what Nisargadatta Maharaj used to call pure consciousness. When the reflect pure consciousness becomes so pure, it somehow it does not have many voice or notions, It remains very, very pure. In meditation, of course. In the moment that you open your eyes, you see a dog, immediately the knowledge of a dog pops up here, and then the pure consciousness, is gone in that sense. But when you are meditating, the idea of Nisargadatta Maharaj is hold on to the sense I am without adding any attribute to this sense of existence, sense of presence. You meditate, I am, I exist, without adding anything to this I thought. So this, we would say that you say is pure consciousness. No, it's the reflect consciousness. It's the I thought. This is the I thought, but it's in its primordial expression before it associates with names and forms. So this meditator, this is the subtle sattvic intellect, is in mithya, of course. It's in mithya. But we have to keep in mind that self-knowledge can only be gained in mithya. Self-knowledge is only good for the jiva. The jiva exists in mitya. Okay? So we need to do our work in mitya. It does not help much to deny mitya and say, hey, I don't care for mitya, I want the real thing. Like someone was asking me the other day, it's not here. I said, no, I want to. I don't want anything about here. I want how I'm established there, how I get there, and so on.
They want to know who they are, but not be in mitya when they know it.
Yeah. But in any case, how can you know anything without an intellect? The self is not an experience or a knower, although nothing is known or experienced without the self. That is the interesting thing, you know. So fundamentally, the self is the only thing that knows, but it does not know by itself. It only knows in association with Maya and the subtle body, and then it's a knower. No? So the work here is to discriminate your fundamental, essential, independent nature from your subtle body, your mind, you know, the reflected I.
So there is still in this reasoning an identification with this knower entity, which is still mitya.
Yeah, which still mitya,
instead of,
yeah.
of the identification with the
Yeah.
self. I see. Okay.
Yeah. And then a moment comes that you are so clear about that, and you see, I am that I am that I, behind the I, okay? But it does not mean that you are not going to be able to exercise your jivahood and be the reflect I, knowing and experience the object. That phenomenon goes on, but it goes on knowing that fundamentally I stand here as awareness, and you know the equipment is doing its things, and I am awareness. It's the knowledge that neutralizes any kind of ignorance that can be effective, or can be, you know, influencing or conditioning our experience here. But this knowledge needs to be something that we need to see directly for ourselves. It's the most simple thing, and most of us know. It's just that keeps going on and off until the light is on all the time, so to speak, and then it's a knowledge that we don't forget. I try to memorize some words and I keep forgetting. So, but when you know that you are in your essence, fundamental nature, your consciousness, and then you don't need to repeat anything. You don't need to convince yourself or reassure yourself. Okay, this is the work. This is the dhyasana, discrimination. To keep separate the milk from the water. The milk and the water, they got mixed up. Now somehow we have to separate the milk from the water. Let's take a short break.